Hello, everyone. Today we're going through something different. I am going to talk about what you need to do to get better at chess. And in order to get to a certain level, there are 5 rules which I think you need to follow. And if you follow those rules, I guarantee that you're going to improve. What are those 5 rules? Rule number 1, you need to look at forcing moves, both by you and your opponent. What are those forcing moves? They're checks, they're captures, and then threats. It's important that you look at checks and captures first, and only later you look at threats. Several of my students have this problem where they want to go attack something and then they do it, but they don't realize that they were already attacking something before. They don't need to go and attack something else. Rule number 2, pay attention to your opponent. What is he doing? Pay attention to all of his threats. Every time your opponent moves, ask yourself why. And sometimes this is very important. There could be more than one why. For example, he or she could be creating 2 threats in one move, and if you might only notice the first one and just stop looking, and then you would lose because you missed the other of the 2 threats. Rule number 3, every time you move, before you make the move, ask, what will my opponent do next? What forcing moves does he or she have? Rule number 4, whenever something moves, this is a common mistake which people make. Don't just look at the piece or the pawn which moved. Ask what changed, what opened, what is now different. Pay attention to those things. And now rule number 5, do not make one move threats. You can make threats if they also improve your position. Do not just make a move and hope that your opponent doesn't see it. To reinforce these 5 rules, I want to show you a very quick game that a student of mine and I played together yesterday against someone rated 1152. So we start with e4, pawn d5, the Scandinavian defense. We took the pawn, black took back. Now we develop with tempo, knight c3, queen a5. Queen a5 is the main move. Nothing special, nothing crazy. Pawn d4, controlling the center. Pawn c6 makes sense, controls these 2 squares, allows for the queen to go back. It's important to control those squares because that's where the knight sometimes wants to jump. We developed our bishop, bishop f4, knight f6. So far so good. Our opponent follows the opening principles, controlling the center, bringing out their pieces, keeping the king safe. So far so good. Bishop c4, we brought out the other bishop. Bishop f5, black developed his bishop. Knight f3, so far nothing special. Everyone is developing. And now black plays knight h5. Knight h5 is what we call a one move threat. Attacks the bishop. Maybe white doesn't see it, and you take. The problem with this move, it doesn't actually improve the knight. It makes the knight worse. Even if white did not have a tactic right now, which we do, this is still not a good move. That breaks the rule, do not make one move threats. If it helps you, you can do it. This move does not help black. It makes his knight worse. But also black broke another of the rules. And that rule is always pay attention to forcing moves by your opponent. Whenever you move, ask yourself, what forced moves does my opponent have checks, captures, and threats? And in this position, we have this check. It looks weird if you think only one move ahead, but this is something that eventually you will need to get better at if you're not good at it already. Thinking more than one move ahead. We check, king takes, but after the king takes, we can move this knight with check and open up our queen on that knight. So every time you move, you need to pay attention to forcing moves by your opponent. So we took the pawn, took back, we checked, opening this up, black moved back, so far so good. Now we took the knight. In this position, black played g6. And again, always look at forcing moves and always follow the rule when something moves. Don't just look at what moves, look at what changes. In this position, white has a tactic. And the tactic is, I hope you were able to find it, knight takes pawn. Why? Because if black takes back, what changes? This. What if black takes with the bishop? Well, what changes? This. So after we take, black cannot take back. Pawn takes, loses the rook. Bishop takes, loses the queen. So once again, 5 rules. Look at forcing moves by you and your opponent. Always look for checks. Always look for checks that your opponent has. Pay attention to your opponent's threats. When you move, ask what will my opponent do next. When something moves, look at what changed. Don't just look at what moves. In this tactic, when the knight moves and the bishop moves, something changes. This line becomes open. That's important. Don't just look at the pieces which move. And finally, do not make one move threats. Do not play moves like knight h5, because if your opponent can simply move the bishop away. If the bishop couldn't move away, that's different. But in this position, knight h5 just doesn't make any sense. I hope you found this video helpful. I will be back with more instructive material. See you soon.